Hiya friends, coming at you in my jammies from my yoga mat. I've been thinking a lot about this question of how do we find a little bit of space and a little bit of peace when there's so much happening in our lives that's so stressful. And I want to acknowledge that that's really real. And sometimes people try to say like, oh, you just gotta think positive, or like, oh, you just gotta, I don't know, well-intentioned things that don't exactly feel helpful. So through my trauma training and the other somatic attachment work that I'm doing, I've just learned that it's really, really important to care for your nervous system and be aware of the way that stress works in us and on us. Basically, you can sort of think of yourself as a glass, and as the day goes on and stress accumulates, the glass gets more and more full and more and more full and more and more full. So then when it's time to leave work and you can't find your keys, you're crying and having a little bit of a meltdown, which feels not exactly in line with the anxiety of losing your keys. That's for real. But your reaction to it feels like way over the top. That's because you are literally over the top. You have reached your stress capacity and there's no more room for any stress in your system. You're full. Some of the other names for this are surge capacity, window of tolerance, and that kind of stuff about like how can we handle the challenges that inevitably come at us in a day. We can't change the fact that raising tiny humans is really hard. We can't change the fact that we live in a capitalist society and we need to make money so that we can feed our families. We can't change the fact that some of us have a really hard time sleeping at night, even though we're trying to do all the right things and do our sleep hygiene and all that stuff. Like, life has challenges. That's the very nature of life. And so when you're feeling like all the advice you're getting is to lower your stress level, but you don't know how to do that, here's one little thing that you can do to sort of tip your glass, maybe get a little bit of the stress out of the way. I'm not saying that this will cure all your problems, but it will sort of reset your stress capacity and give you just a little bit of breathing space so that maybe when you can't find your keys, you're mad and a little bit irritated, but maybe you're not having these colossal meltdowns, and kind of building your resilience and building your capacity to handle. Not that you'd add anything, don't add anything, but that you can handle what you're already doing. So I love to do this as sort of a transitional activity. You know, I'm in between students, or when I'm changing tasks, like I'm going from email time to study time to practice time. When I sit down to do a new thing, or when I'm getting up as a kind of way of completing a thing. Just a little bit of self-touch, self-massage. You get to choose the level of pressure, and you get to choose kind of how it's going to work. But just this idea that, you know, we carry a lot of stress in neck and shoulders. And so just to kind of remind ourselves that our bodies go beyond sort of that stress area that might be asking for your attention. Just kind of bringing some intentional awareness to your arms, letting your hands do something different if you've been typing or playing the piano or whatever. And if it feels good, you can even experiment with a little bit of padding, just all the way down your arm and back again. Whatever feels right to you, just to kind of like remind yourself that you're in a body. You're not just a task-doing robot. And that there's an all of you beyond just this cognitive computer, or beyond owie, stress in my body, right? Another element of this is you can creep up a little bit above your shoulder. I recommend doing this one at a time, just so you can notice a little bit more. Sides of the body are always a little bit different. Just kind of feel into these muscles, like right at the back of you. That's the trapezius. and then a little bit up the back of your neck especially. So I just met some phenomenal chiropractors last week. They've developed this really unique therapeutic system called the Katman technique, Katman, if you're in the mood for looking it up. But one of the doctors was actually sent to a flood zone in Italy where people had lost, their whole villages, their homes. And he found that of the 300 people that he saw, they all were carrying stress or disruptions, subluxations is the chiropractor word for it, in the same places. C1, which is right where right at the top of the spine, and then T2 and T5 thoracic vertebrae. So it was really interesting that, in this very traumatic situation, that people were all kind of carrying the same indicators of that stress and trauma. And I'm really interested in this one back here, this C1, because he also talked about, one of the doctors was talking about this kind of tightening of the dura that's, on the top of our head. And that, can contribute to a lot of eye strain and headaches and all this kind of stuff. And it's all sort of related there to the very back of the head. And so this idea of just taking a minute to massage up the back and maybe do a little bit of tiny looking up if that feels right. Or just my other favorite is the bobblehead. Just some really gentle circles on that top, big giant vertebra at the top of your spine. Just to kind of find a little ease and a little space. Ta-da!